Iran must bear responsibility for the damage and death caused to the people of Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and the Gaza Strip. That's what President Donald Trump is saying. Trump is now talking about the possibility of large-scale military escalation against Iran immediately. The United States is sending 20 additional warships to the Middle East. And in a secret operation in the Gulf, under the radar, Italy has deployed hundreds of fighters opposite Iran. Iran is collapsing. The fuel crisis is pushing citizens to despair. Iran's Revolutionary Guards are going bankrupt, and the regime is heading towards economic collapse. The Iranian currency is in free fall, and inflation is already pushing the country towards triple-digit levels. So what is behind Trump's Iranian zigzag? The United States is returning to economic pressure on Iran based on the assessment that the Revolutionary Guards are going bankrupt. Trump is turning Iran's demand for compensation against it. You want money? Now our bill is on the table. Iranian President Pezeshkian is changing his story and now says that he met with Mojtaba Khamenei for 7 hours. At the same time, the Revolutionary Guards are saying that they are not on the way to an agreement and will soon bring you the dramatic move by Iran's leader that shows where this is all heading. And this morning, oil prices reached a 2-week high. How high will the price of a barrel of oil continue to climb? An Israeli cyber Iron Dome helped the United Arab Emirates repel a large-scale Iranian cyber attack today. We'll bring you all the details. And today, we bring you the full story that has now been revealed about how Trump was extracted from Turkey, how Air Force One took off without the president, how he was smuggled out in a transport truck, and all the details of the dramatic deception operation. So stay with us until the end. And is Israel facing a new danger as advanced Hermes 900 drones become war spoils for Iran? I'm Mati Shoshani. Yair Pinto is not here today, but we arranged, well, a day off for him so he could refresh a little. Today, Ashlea Alex will be with me, and we are boots on the ground. We're bringing you the truth about what's happening in Israel and the whole truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today is August the 11th. Let's get started. President Donald Trump refused to reveal the next steps in the negotiations with Iran, but noted that Washington still has the option to carry out broad military escalation against Tehran. However, because of the deadlock with Iran, the Trump administration has decided for now to give up on additional military strikes, avoid direct negotiations, and instead prefer economic sanctions and a tight naval blockade. Trump made clear that if Iran demands compensation for the damage caused to it during the latest military confrontation, then the United States will also demand compensation from Iran for the damage it has caused over the years. Now, according to him, the Iranian demand was never mentioned in any of our negotiations or meetings. He added that he is now demanding compensation for the Americans who were killed and wounded in terrorist attacks and conflicts in which Iran was involved. Later, he added, regarding the negotiations with Iran must bear responsibility for the damage and death caused to the people of Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Gaza. Trump ended his remarks by making clear that he intends to turn this demand into part of every future negotiation with Tehran. I've instructed my representatives to include this clearly in every future negotiation. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. He ended, as he usually does, his post. I have to say something. It may look to everyone like Trump is zigzagging from side to side, and I know the media loves to interpret this as if he's crazy or as if he's making decisions because of a shortage of interceptors and missiles. To me, a lot of that sounds like nonsense. It seems that the latest moves against Iran are connected to the fact that Trump conducts politics like a businessman, not like a politician. In his book, The Art of the Deal, Trump often uses the concept of leverage. A study conducted at MIT explains that this is a forceful negotiation approach that narrows the other side's room for maneuver to only two choices: accept the offer with clear incentive or face severe consequences if refused. If this is indeed the approach guiding President Trump today against Iran, then the zigzags and contradictory statements may reflect the deliberate use of a technique designed to wear down the Iranians and bring them to accept his demands. The common assumption is that Trump's hesitation is exhausting his military, his allies in the Gulf, and Israel. Anyone who thinks that forgets that the price Iran is paying for dragging out the clock is far heavier than the price being paid by the United States. Iran, we need to remember, is under a naval blockade. Its economy is eroding. Prices of basic goods are breaking records. The population is suffering and angry. And inside the regime itself, the tension is sharpening between the hardliners who insist on continuing the confrontation and those who fear the dangerous domestic price. Iran, we must remember, is under a naval blockade. Its economy is eroding. Prices of basic goods are breaking records. The population is suffering and angry. And inside the regime itself, the tension is sharpening between the hardliners who insist on continuing the confrontation and those who fear the dangerous domestic price. Ask me for anything, just not time. Napoleon used to tell his marshals before every campaign, because he understood that whoever controls time holds the key to victory. A superpower like the United States has the resources and endurance that allow it to control time and turn it into a weapon. The Revolutionary Guards, on the other hand, boast that they can hold out forever. But given the basic asymmetry working against them, and the fact that they carry on their backs a huge population that must be fed, employed, and provided with energy and services, time may actually become their enemy. What looks from the outside like Trump's zigzag may actually be part of a war of attrition, in which blockade, shortages, and public pressure replace kinetic weapons. It's also important not to underestimate the fact that the United States military is in principle preparing for attack, while the Iranians are in principle preparing for defense. That defense is supposed to protect vital infrastructure, deny the U.S. military freedom of action, and prevent it from achieving its objectives. But given the severe erosion suffered by Iran's air defense systems, the ability of the Iranians to prevent American aircraft from doing whatever they want inside Iran is close to zero. And meanwhile, inside Iran's Revolutionary Guards, in the middle of an effort to rebuild the chain of command damaged by months of Israeli and American strikes, Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has announced a broad round of appointments at the top of the army, the Revolutionary Guards, and the Basij organization. Experts warn that the nature and timing of the appointments indicate that Tehran is preparing for a prolonged confrontation, not for an arrangement with Washington. And inside Iran, the shortage of gasoline and diesel is pushing citizens to the edge. This evening, long lines of cars were recorded at a gas station in Bandar Abbas, stretching far from the station under scorching weather. The crisis in the province continues despite repeated promises by officials. Experts warn that the nature and timing of the appointments indicate that Tehran is preparing for a prolonged confrontation, not for an arrangement with Washington. And inside Tehran, the shortage of gasoline and diesel is pushing citizens to the edge. This evening, long lines of cars were recorded at a gas station in Bandar Abbas, stretching far from the station under scorching weather. The crisis in the province continues despite repeated promises by officials to solve the issue. This situation is causing widespread public anger and sharp criticism towards the Iranian terror regime, which diverts enormous resources to funding terror and military activity in the region, while abandoning the future of its citizens and severely neglecting infrastructure and basic needs inside the country. The combination of unfulfilled promises, strict rationing, and extreme heat continues to raise a level of frustration across large parts of Iran. Now, at the same time, the National Cybersecurity Council of the United Arab Emirates announced that it had thwarted advanced cyber attack targeting the aviation, energy, and education sectors in the country. Now, according to the announcement, The attacks were handled proactively and immediately, and the intrusion attempts were blocked before the attackers could achieve their goals. Today, we'll get into the story of the close cooperation between Israel and the Emirates, an Israeli cyber iron dome that helps the Emirates repel a large-scale Iranian attack. The head of the UAE Cybersecurity Council, Mohammed al-Kuwaiti, has publicly stated in the past that Israel, its National Cyber Directorate, and Israeli technology companies are actively helping the Emirates build and improve a cyber iron dome to repel attacks. We'll bring you all the details. And Houthi attacks on the port city in Mokha in Yemen are killing many soldiers. The army of Yemen's government reported that the Iranian-backed Houthi forces renewed their attacks on the Yemeni port city of Mokha, located on the Red Sea coast. We'll expand on the Houthi attacks shortly. And by the way, if you know how to pronounce that name, let me know in the comments. There's a lot ahead of us. Let's dive into the details. I'm Mati Shoshani, joined by Ashlea Alex, and we are boots on the ground. We bring you the truth about what's happening in Israel and about the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. But before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click the subscribe button. And most importantly, don't forget to find me, Mati Shoshani, and Yael Pinto on social media to get our firsthand perspective on what it's like to live in Israel under war. Let's talk about our shout out for today. Life here in Israel keeps us moving. One day we're hiking desert trails. The next we're filming in remote locations, training or exploring ancient biblical sites. It's the kind of lifestyle that demands mobility and recovery. That's why I've started using Ancient Nutrition Multi-Collagen Protein. It helps support healthy joints, skin, and overall recovery. Important when you're constantly active and putting your body to work. Ancient Nutrition Multi-Collagen Protein combines multiple collagen sources into one easy-to-use formula. And its life fits perfectly into your daily routine. Now, whether you're hiking, traveling, working long hours, or simply trying to support your health, mobility, and active lifestyle, Ancient Nutrition Multi-Collagen Protein is a simple way to support your body and keep moving forward. To try Ancient Nutrition Multi-Collagen Protein for yourself, visit ancientnutrition.com and use promo code Israel26 to save 26% on your order and support your health and the mission of TBN Israel. Right now, the most important military fact in the Strait of Hormuz is that Washington and Tehran are using the same waterway for two very different purposes. President Trump says the strait is open. Operationally, the American blockade is aimed at ships entering or leaving Iranian ports, while commercial traffic headed to non-Iranian ports is still supposed to move. That distinction matters. The United States is trying to keep global shipping alive while cutting Iran itself off from maritime trade. CENTCOM has already announced its 100th redirected commercial vessel by May the 23rd, and American forces have continued enforcing the blockade since then. So when Trump says the U.S. Navy controls the strait, the real military picture is more precise. American forces are trying to control access, inspect suspicious traffic, clear threats, protect permitted shipping, and deny Tehran the economic benefit of normal port activity. Iran is answering that pressure by rebuilding the command structure that was badly damaged during the war. Mojtaba Khamenei has now issued decrees placing 6 senior figures into key military positions. Major General Ali Abdullahi, was named Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, with Qiyomaris Haidari as his deputy. Ahmed Vahidi was promoted and appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Revolutionary Guards, with Mustafa Izadi as his deputy. Ali Azmei was placed in charge of the IRGC Navy, and Hussein Taib was appointed to lead the Basij. Those are not ceremonial jobs, guys. The IRGC Navy is the force most directly connected to Iranian pressure in the Persian Gulf. The Basij is central to international and internal security and regime control. And Wahidi is a veteran hardliner who has long been accused by Argentina in connection with the 1994 AMIA bombing in Buenos Aires and has been the subject of an Interpol Red Notice. The timing is important because Tehran is negotiating while rebuilding its ability to fight. President Masoud Pezeshkian says he recently spent nearly 7 hours meeting with Mojtaba Khamenei, discussing sanctions, jobs, housing, the market, public support, national unity, and the consequences of the war. Khamenei has still not made a normal public appearance since taking power. Iranian state media continues to carry written statements attributed to him, while questions about his health and security remain part of the background conversation. There's another military story Iran clearly wants Israel to notice. Iranian outlets have displayed what they claim is an Israeli Hermes 900 drone captured in relatively intact condition. That claim has not been independently verified. But if the aircraft is genuine and sufficiently intact, Iranian engineers would be interested in its communication links, antennas, sensors, navigation, architecture, and electronic protection systems. That does not mean Iran can simply copy the drone. It means Israel has to assume that any recoverable hardware can become an intelligence source for the other side. The pressure is spreading beyond the battlefield. Local reports from Bandar Abbas and several other Iranian provinces describe long fuel lines and tight limits at some stations, including reports of drivers receiving only 15 liters at a time. We need to be careful not to turn local shortages into a claim that every Iranian gas station is dry. But the images matter because they show how sanctions, disrupted trade, infrastructure damage, and wartime demand are reaching ordinary people. The Gulf states are also hardening their defenses. The United Arab Emirates says it recently stopped a coordinated cyber campaign aimed at aviation, energy, and education networks. The UAE already has deep cyber cooperation with Israel, including shared work on threat intelligence. But one point needs to stay precise. The existence of Israeli-UAE cyber cooperation does not by itself prove that an Israeli system stopped the specific attack. And Italy is now part of the regional defense picture in much more visible way. Italy's defense ministry confirmed roughly 400 Air Force personnel deployed across Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Bahrain. The force includes 4 Eurofighter F-200A fighters, an E-550A airborne early warning aircraft, C-130 transport capability, and AN-TPS-77 air defense radar and counter-drone unit. Separate reporting describes an additional Italian land component and longer-range air defense systems. Europe is not leading this war, but some European militaries are quietly building a defensive shield around the Gulf. Lebanon remains another pressure point. The next round of Israeli-Lebanese talks has been delayed. Beirut wants wider Israeli withdrawals. Israel has complained to Washington that elements of the Lebanese army are coordinating with Hezbollah, and Jerusalem is also trying to shape which foreign countries could participate in any future mechanism meant to help disarm Hezbollah. France, Turkey, and Spain have been rejected by Israel for that role, while other countries remain under discussion. And in Yemen, Houthi attacks around the port of Mokha show that the Red Sea front is still active even while the main diplomatic attention is on Hormuz. That matters to Saudi Arabia, especially after its new defense arrangement with Turkey and Pakistan. Now, before we continue, help us share the truth from Israel. Like this report, share it, and subscribe to Boots on the Ground so you don't miss the next change in this rapidly developing war. What you see on YouTube is only part of the story. Get closer to our first-hand reporting, behind-the-scenes moments, and stories of faith, resilience, and hope from Israel at www.tbn.org/journeys/boots. You can also text the words Boots to 316-316 to receive direct updates from TBN Israel. Now, when we report from Israel, you are not only watching the Middle East from a studio thousands of miles away, you're seeing how military decisions, diplomacy, and pressure are felt by people who actually live here. And now, I want to bring in Ashlea, because the military pressure only makes sense if we understand what President Trump is trying to buy with time and what Washington is preparing to do if that time runs out. Let's go to Ashlea.
From Washington, the clearest word is pressure, not pause. President Trump is signaling that he does not want another major round of strikes right now. At the same time, he has refused to take a large-scale military escalation off the table. When reporters asked whether the United States still had the ability to escalate dramatically, his answer was essentially, yes, and you will see. That may sound contradictory, but the policy is becoming easier to read. The administration is moving back toward aggressive sanctions, tighter financial enforcement, and the naval blockade, while preserving the threat of air power. The latest American strategy has even been described inside the administration as Operation Economic Fury. The goal is to make Tehran pay every day that it refuses a deal without immediately paying the military and political costs of a new bombing campaign. Trump is publicly describing Iran as broke. His economic team argues that the rial has been crushed, inflation is severe, oil income is constrained, and the regime is under growing difficulty financing both the state and its security system. Those are administration claims, and some of the most dramatic numbers are contested. But the direction of policy is clear. Washington believes time can hurt Iran more than it hurts the United States. That's one way to understand what many people call Trump zigzag. There is also a negotiating logic here. Trump has always preferred leverage over clean, predictable diplomacy. If Tehran does not know whether the next American move is another sanction package, a naval seizure, a diplomatic offer, or a major strike, Iranian decision-makers have to plan against several possibilities at once. The danger is that unpredictability works both ways. If Tehran concludes that every American threat will eventually be delayed, then uncertainty stops being leverage and starts becoming a credibility problem. That's why the argument over compensation is more important than it looks. Iran demanded compensation for damage caused during the war. Trump did not simply reject the demand, he opened a counterclaim and ordered his negotiators to put it into future talks. He says Iran should compensate Americans killed or badly wounded in attacks linked to Iranian-backed forces. And he has broadened the argument to include victims in Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Gaza, and Iranian protesters killed by the regime. Some of Trump's examples are much stronger than others. Iran's support for militias that used explosively formed penetrators against American troops in Iraq is a well-established part of the historical dispute between Washington and Tehran. But Trump also cited the families of the 17 U.S. sailors killed in the USS Cole bombing in 2000. That attack was carried out by al-Qaeda, not Iran. If compensation becomes a formal negotiating file, that distinction matters. Trump also cited a figure of 52,000 people killed inside Iran during the last 5 months. That is the president's figure. It is not a number we should present as an independently verified. The counterclaim changes the bargaining table. Instead of negotiating only over what Washington might pay Tehran, Trump creates an American demand he can later trade away. Both sides could ultimately drop compensation claims and describe the result as a concession they extracted. But the most revealing story about Washington's assessment of the Iranian threat may have nothing to do with sanctions. We now know much more about what happened on July 8th, when President Trump left the NATO summit in Ankara. At the time, the public saw Trump board the old Air Force One. There had already been reporting about a credible Iranian proxy threat against the president's aircraft. The new details show that the security operation went much further. Trump walked up the stairs in front of cameras and entered the aircraft as expected. Once he was out of public view, he and a small group moved toward a door on the opposite side of the plane. A catering truck was positioned there. The president was concealed through that ground operation and transferred to a smaller military C-32A, a modified Boeing 757. The old Air Force One then departed as a decoy. Journalists and even some White House personnel remained aboard the decoy aircraft, believing the president was traveling with them. They were told to keep the window shades closed. Trump, meanwhile, flew separately to the United Kingdom on the C-32A under a less conspicuous military profile. That's not a normal presidential travel adjustment. It's a deception operation built around the possibility that someone might be tracking the aircraft and preparing to target the president. It also changes how we should understand Trump's public language toward Iran. He can threaten overwhelming force, mock Tehran's economic condition, and say the United States controls Hormuz. But his own security service was taking an Iranian assassination or missile threat seriously enough to use the presidential aircraft as part of a decoy plan. That does not prove Iran had a missile locked onto Air Force One. It does show that American intelligence judged the threat credible enough to change presidential movement at the highest security level. Now look at the political side inside Iran. Pezeshkian is trying to project normal government. He says his long meeting with Mojtaba Khamenei was positive and that the supreme leader's highest priority is internal unity. That message is understandable. The regime is dealing with sanctions, a damaged economy, military losses, public frustration, and questions about who is actually making decisions. At the same time, the military appointments Matti described send a harder message. Tehran is not dismantling wartime structures. It's filling empty chairs, restoring chains of command, and putting experienced security figures in positions that matter for external operations and internal control. Washington may be using time as a weapon, but Tehran is using that same time to repair the state. And the regional map is moving while both sides wait. Saudi Arabia's new defense arrangement with Turkey and Pakistan is one of the most important geopolitical developments around this war. The immediate logic is easy to understand. Riyadh has been hit by Houthi pressure, threatened by Iranian-backed forces, and repeatedly reminded that American protection is powerful, but not automatic. So Saudi Arabia is diversifying. That does not mean Riyadh has abandoned the United States. It means Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman does not want Saudi national security to depend on one outside power making the right decision at the right moment. The concern in Israel is that a structure built today to deter Iran can develop interests tomorrow that are not aligned with Israel. Pakistani leaders have already used sharply anti-Israel rhetoric. Turkey's political confrontation with Israel has deepened. Egypt has been discussed as a possible future participant after technical issues are resolved. At the same time, Saudi Arabia still shares a basic interest with Israel in containing Iranian power and limiting Houthi and militia threats. So this is not a simple anti-Israel alliance, and it would be a mistake to describe it that way. It's a sign that the region is building new security options because confidence in a single American-led framework has weakened. That matters for Trump's Iran strategy. The longer the war and Hormuz crisis continue without a decisive settlement, the more regional governments will make their own arrangements. Some will buy more weapons. Some will invite foreign forces. Some will build new alliances. Some will hedge between Washington, Ankara, Beijing, Islamabad, and even Tehran. America can still be the strongest external power in the Middle East and still lose political influence if partners stop waiting for Washington to organize the system. Oil is part of that pressure. Prices have pushed back to a 2-week high as hopes for a quick Hormuz settlement weakened. Trump wants enough commercial traffic moving through the strait to prevent another energy shock, while keeping Iranian ports under blockade. Tehran wants sanctions relief, frozen assets, security guarantees, and leverage over the same waterway. That is why both sides can say the strait is open and still mean completely different things. For Washington, open means international commerce can move without Iran controlling the price of passage. For Tehran, reopening fully is a bargaining chip that should purchase political and economic concessions. And this brings us back to the military option. Trump is choosing economic pressure for now because it gives him room. If sanctions and the blockade deepen Iran's crisis, he can claim he avoided another costly air campaign and force Tehran back toward concessions. If Iran escalates against American forces, shipping, or Gulf infrastructure, he has preserved the argument that the next strike was a response, not a first choice. That is also why the secret flight from Turkey belongs in the same story as the sanctions and the compensation dispute. The administration is trying to pressure Iran without acting as if Iran is harmless. It's bargaining with a regime it simultaneously treats as capable of threatening shipping lanes, American troops, Gulf partners, and the president himself. Matti, before we're back to you, remember that while Washington is testing whether time can break Tehran's will, Israel has to plan for the possibility that at the same time helps Tehran rebuild enough military capability to make the next round harder. Now, back to you, Matti.
Thank you, Ashlea. And from Israel, that is a tension we are following. Iran is rebuilding senior command positions, while ordinary Iranians are dealing with economic pressure, fuel shortages, and the cost of a war the regime still refuses to end. Iran is rebuilding its command, while the United States tries to break the regime economically without triggering the next regional firestorm. If that pressure fails before Tehran restores enough military capacity, who moves first? Washington, Tehran, or Israel? So keep spreading the truth, follow us, and most importantly, don't forget to click the subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss boots on the ground. Keep looking for me, Matti Shoshani, and Yael Pinto on social media to see life in Israel through our eyes. And now, as always, let's pray for the people of Israel. And I want to challenge you guys. This is not a spectator sport. This is something you actively need to participate in, to pray daily, to read the Bible daily too, but that's between you and God. And most importantly, to continue praying for what is happening in the world. Guys, God is sovereign, God is operating, God is working in this part of the world, but we are called to pray for our leadership, for Trump and Netanyahu, even if we don't agree with him. By the way, anywhere you live in the world, pray for your leader. We're commanded to do that, for him to or submit to God's design and desire or to be replaced. Pray for our soldiers, the Israeli ones, the Americans in the region, the Italian ones that are reportedly joining in. Pray for the peace of God to reside over this Middle East and for a change in leadership in the countries around us and for God's will to be done in earth as it is in heaven. Be blessed, guys, and don't forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Hello, this is Matti here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yael Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.